Several conservationists suggested that the lynx can be reintroduced within 20 years in the recent trip of the Cairngorm Mountains. If trees return to the bare hills anywhere in Britain, the big cats will follow. If it is seen from the perspective of anywhere else in Europe, there will be nothing extraordinary about the proposals. Now, the lynx has been reintroduced to the mountains.
One treatment even included wholly emptying the stomach, we guess because the doctors thought that if a patient got hungry enough, the body would force them to wake up. Or maybe they really were just throwing everything including the kitchen sink at the problem, which we're sure was also tried. Comas can occur as a result of serious trauma or as a deliberate medical treatment by doctors. The new heart is then connected to the major blood vessels, and this might take several hours. You'll stay in the hospital for 1 to 2 weeks, and if your body doesn't reject its new heart, it's said 87 out of 100 people make it through the year, and 60 out of 100 get through another decade. So, wouldn't it just be possible to open the skull and connect a new brain where the removed brain was connected? This question was asked to a professor of neurosurgery at Yale in 2013. He actually did say that one day this operation might be successful, but right now we are not even close. The major currency of our reward system is dopamine, an important chemical or neurotransmitter. There are many dopamine receptors in the forebrain, but they're not evenly distributed. Certain areas contain dense clusters of receptors, and these dopamine hotspots are a part of our reward system. Drugs like alcohol, nicotine, or heroin send dopamine into overdrive.
The history of today's plastics begins with the discovery of a series of semi-synthetic thermoplastic materials in the mid-19th century. The impetus behind the development of these early plastics was generated by a number of factors: immense technological progress in the domain of chemistry, coupled with wider cultural changes, and the pragmatic need to find acceptable substitutes for dwindling supplies of luxury materials such as tortoiseshell and ivory. There will be no threat to human beings by the lynx. There is no instance of a lynx preying on people. It is a specialist predator of roe deer that has exploded in Britain in recent decades, which holds back the intensive browsing and planning to re-establish forests. It will also winkle out seeker deer, an exotic species that is impossible for human beings to control as it hides in impenetrable plantations of young trees. Reintroducing this predator comes with the aim of bringing back the forests to the parts of our bare and barren uplands. The lynx needs deep cover, thus giving little risk to sheep and other livestock which need to be in a condition of farm subsidies that are kept out of the woods.
Despite the fact that the origin of the word comes from the Greek for coma, or deep sleep, comas are not sleep, however, and are instead various forms of unconsciousness that render a person unable to respond to any external stimuli. You can play the loudest, heaviest death metal in the world right next to someone who's comatose, and you won't succeed in doing anything except really annoying the neighbors. Likewise, you can even physically hurt people in a coma and they will remain completely oblivious and unresponsive. In times not too distant past, this was sometimes used as treating, with doctors trying to shock their victims back into consciousness. This thing inside our skulls that weighs on average about 3.3 pounds is larger in humans than any other vertebrae when compared to body weight. That's why we are so brainy. The busy brain is our command center for our nervous system, which takes in data from our body and gives directions to our muscles. In fact, it does so much work, it requires about 20% of our energy to run it. When we are brain dead, we no longer have any neurological activity. With the help of machines, we can be kept alive for a short time, but within a week, the body will not be able to function. In speech, however, a word can take on additional layers of meaning. Tone of voice, the relationship between speakers, and expectations of where a conversation will go can imbue even words that seem like filler with vital information. Linguists call these filled pauses, which are a kind of hesitation phenomenon. And these seemingly insignificant interruptions are actually quite meaningful in spoken communication. For example, while a silent pause might be interpreted as a sign for others to start speaking, a filled pause can signal that you're not finished yet.
However, there is another type of laughter, the laughter of social appeasement, and it is important to understand this too. Play is a crucial part of development in most young mammals. Rats produce ultrasonic squeaks to prevent their scuffles turning nasty. Chimpanzees have a play face, a gaping expression accompanied by a panting noise. In humans, these signals have mutated into smiles and laughs. Researchers believe social situations, rather than cognitive events such as jokes, trigger these instinctual markers of play or appeasement. This growing concern about intellectual property rights was a feature of the period. It reflected both the humanist notion of the individual, ration as scientist who invents and discovers through private intellectual labor, and the growing connection between original science and commercial exploitation. There was something of a social distinction between scholars and gentlemen, who understood Latin, and men of trade who lacked a classical education. Ocean sources, oceans, which span more than 70% of the Earth's surface, contain both thermal and mechanical energy from the sun's heat and tides and waves. Solar radiation is converted to electricity by ocean thermal energy conversion (OTEC). To create electricity, OTEC power plants employ the temperature difference between warm surface waters heated by the sun and colder waters found at ocean depths. The energy of the tides can also be used to generate electricity.
Theories about humor have an ancient pedigree. Plato expressed the idea that humor is simply a delighted feeling of superiority over others. Kant and Freud felt that joke-telling relies on building up a psychic tension which is safely punctured by the ludicrousness of the punchline. But most modern humor theorists have settled on some version of Aristotle's belief that jokes are based on a reaction to or resolution of incongruity, when the punchline is either a nonsense or, though appearing silly, has a clever second meaning. The original patent outlined a three-stage process, in which phenol and formaldehyde, from wood or coal, were initially combined under vacuum inside a large egg-shaped kettle. The result was a resin known as novolac, which became soluble and malleable when heated. The resin was allowed to cool in shallow trays until it hardened, and then broken up and ground into powder. Other substances were then introduced, including fillers, such as wood flour, asbestos or cotton, which increase strength and moisture resistance. However, in British culture this is not the last glimpse of the animal. A 9th-century stone cross from the Isle of Egg shows along the deer, pig, aurochs, the speckled cat with tasseled ears is pursued by a mounted hunter. We are sure that the animal's backside hasn't been damaged over time as the lynx's stubby tail is unmistakable. It's difficult to know about the creature even without this feature. Now, lynx has become the totemic animal of a movement that transforms British environmentalism rewilding.
Fuel cells are electrochemical devices that use a chemical reaction to generate power. Fuel cells are rechargeable, have no moving parts, are quiet, and have no moving parts. Scientists are investigating how they could be utilized as a power source for almost emission-free autos and as electricity-generating plants. The exorbitant cost of producing fuel cells has kept this important energy source from becoming widely used. It is estimated that by the end of the 18th century 401 German scientific journals had been established as opposed to 96 in France and 50 in England. However, in the 19th century scientific English again enjoyed substantial lexical growth as the Industrial Revolution created the need for new technical vocabulary and new, specialized professional societies were instituted to promote and publish in the new disciplines. World science is dominated today by a small number of languages, including Japanese, German and French, but it is English which is probably the most popular global language of science. This is not just because of the importance of English-speaking countries such as the USA in scientific research. The scientists of many non-English-speaking countries find that they need to write their research papers in English to reach a wide international audience.